Welcome back to our skill development series. As we begin our final sessions here, we're working towards the overall objective of this process is being able to answer the question asked in every interview process. Tell us a little bit about yourself, including your strengths and your weaknesses. We always start with the disc wheel here, and then we start to begin in these last sessions to really start to hone in on what the mission is, to become the world's greatest expert on yourself, and then transferring that to other people that you're meeting for the first time in many cases in a way in this interview setting. Also, the vision to create desirable applicants through our opportunities, our processes, and our experiences. This piece here, as we start to work through the interview process, is part of the experience itself. We've had the opportunity to learn about ourselves. We've gone through a process of different lessons. Now, the experience will be translating that information that you see here with the overall objective to answer with confidence. That's the key word here. The first question asked in every interview setting, please tell us a little bit about yourself, including your strengths and your weaknesses. Today's objective is putting it all together. Most of this information will be review. This is the activity that you'll complete is starting to put all of this information that you know about yourself as you've become the expert on yourself into a format, into a response, so that when you're asked this question that you have a response that starts to accentuate the positives in you, the strengths in you, and the skills of you also that you know about yourself. Three key questions that we want to talk about today. What have you learned about you? And all of this is related to the DISC assessment. The second, how can you turn your skills and your strengths into I am identity statements? I am this, I am that, I am confident. Whatever those strengths and skills are, we want to start with I am statements and then start to bring in a process where you can get into a free flowing response when you know that you're going to be asked that question. And the third is where can challenges be applied to strengths? We talked about that in some of our previous sessions. Recognize our challenges and then how we overcome those challenges by utilizing our strengths. So when we look at the DISC assessment, we go back all the way to the beginning when the D, the I, the S, and the C. What do my top DISC scores say about me as to how I respond to these four questions? When I look at the D, the high D or the low D, again, the scores itself don't matter, but how do I respond to problems and challenges is the question that we're looking to answer when we're looking at the D score. The I score is how do I influence others to my point of view? What are some processes that I use that are my natural traits to try to influence others to a point of view that I have? The third, with the steadiness, is how do I respond to the pace of the environment? And then the four is respond to rules and procedures set by others. The answers to these four questions align to the observable behaviors that we see in the D, the I, the S, and the C score. Having an understanding of those, and we worked through this in previous sessions, these are summary statements. These are generalities that typically, if you have a higher D score, you start to see these things above the energy line. If you start to see a lower D score, you start to see those characteristics below. We also look through this with the I, similar process. The higher I score, more verbal and persuasive. The lower I score, more data and facts. The higher S, kind of a one at a time approach. The lower, the pace and the change, let's go. You want to be more rapid and more movement in your activity. And the finally, the high C score complies to the rules set by others. Well, oftentimes you'll see that the challenges, rules, and seek independence are the tendencies of the lower C. You'll start to see some of these in different interactions that you have, but what are your most pronounced characteristics? What are your most pronounced scores here, and where do you see these traits show up? We also want to look at how the DISC indicates the most and least effective ways to communicate with you. There's value in expressing this information to others because ultimately communication is a two-way street, and making sure that you are able to effectively communicate, and you do this with your teachers. This is the best way to communicate with me and also the least effective way to communicate with me. You are asked to identify three of those. You have a list in your DISC assessment, somewhere between probably 8 and 13 criteria or characteristics or generalities about how the best to communicate with you and how best not to communicate with you. We allowed you to pick your top three of each. We want to find ways to articulate that so that whomever you're going to work with, whatever team, opportunity, job that you might enter, that we know going in, this is the best and oftentimes the least effective way to communicate with you. So then we also start to say, what are some characteristics of the high D or the low D, going back to the DISC assessment, with regards to typical communication preferences. And you start to see these examples here. We went through these in earlier lessons. These are common traits. Again, they're not a full list of what it might be, but these are common traits we start to see with people who have the higher D score. The same with the I, right? We want to see individuals that have the scores that are high I. These are typical communication preferences for those individuals that are the high I. The same with the S. Again, we start to see these typical communications as you review this information here. You start to see ways to communicate with them and strategies when you're communicating with different individuals that might have a high S. Not only how you might communicate with them, but how they might communicate with you, and how you can explain to individuals how to best communicate with you. And then finally, here with the high C, right? These are individuals, these are characteristics that we see with people with a high C score, how we can best communicate and how you can express your communication preferences over time. We also spend a lot of time looking at the DISC and the Pareto principle, where 80% of our results, or another way to say it, 80% of our successes come from 20% of our activities or 20% of our skills and strengths. And so we use this question: how do I recognize, define, and grow my strengths and skills? Although we're asking the individual to tell us a little bit about yourself, including your strengths and weaknesses, the most specific part of this answer is about your strengths and your skills. So what are those skills, right? And we started to label them this way: the signature strengths. If we look at it from a standpoint of the portrait of a graduate with the knowledge, skills, experiences, and attributes, ultimately we all have signature strengths. How do I communicate those, and how do I start to tell others that these are the strengths I have that stand out among all others? What are those strengths, and how do I communicate that? Because we know we want to focus our activities, we want to focus on what we want to do next based upon those strengths. Knowing that they're well developed, also they oftentimes take us less energy to do. Doesn't mean we don't work hard at it. Quite the opposite. It means we can work harder, and we're getting into a flow state simply because these skills, we're in our wheelhouse. We're in the things that we do well already, and they take us less energy because we're very focused about the skills and the strengths that we have. We also want to recognize the potential challenges. And we used this graphic earlier to say, yes, these are my specific challenges that I have based upon my behavioral styles and my traits, but these are strengths that I can use. And you see this highlighted in blue. I can use these strengths to overcome these challenges that I might have. There's great value in recognizing the challenges that we have. However, it's all about overcoming them by utilizing our strengths. We don't want to focus on our weaknesses. A simple acknowledgement of those weaknesses, but more specifically, how do we overcome those using our strengths and our skills? So we want to develop a template that we're going to start to use here, right? And so we want to begin simply with the STAR technique, and this is the template that we're going to use to build your response to. Tell us a little bit about yourself, including your strengths and your weaknesses. We start first with a situation. What is an example in your past, or examples in your past, that you can utilize to start to highlight your strengths? From there, we're going to talk about the task that you completed. This happened, and these are the strengths and skills that I used to complete this specific task. We also want to make sure what actions you took. Again, going through the whole skill development process and improving skills or improving a situation is all about taking action first. So we've identified a situation. Here's the tasks that need to be done. Here's what I did using your strengths, using your skills. This is the actions that I took. Ultimately finishing with the result. Put together, we have the situation, the tasks that need to be completed, the actions that we took, and the result. We speak with this with confidence. This really starts to drive home based upon the examples and things that you have done specifically. The situation, the task, the action, the result, with confidence, tells the person sitting across the table, this individual has done something. They recognize the task that they've accomplished, and they're very cognizant of the results. This process here, the situation, the task, the action, and the result, indicates the confidence the person sitting across the table that this individual that they're talking to, which is you, understands what they've done, understands how they went about it, they understand their strengths and their skills, and they're results oriented. That's what we want to convey as far as the storytelling goes as to what we've been able to accomplish using this information. So we're going to build our responses today. We go back to this process here: act, skills, results, confidence, repeat. But we inserted a word. In our next session, we're going to start to get feedback. In our next session together, you're going to start to answer this question in front of your peers. And then we're going to go through the feedback loop of this. Getting feedback on this, starting to refine the responses here to make sure we're within the appropriate time limits, to make sure that we specifically start with the 3 pieces of it. Tell us a little bit about you, the strengths and the challenges. Making sure we go through this process and getting feedback, making revisions, getting feedback. That's where the repeat comes in. I look forward to this part of the journey, developing your response to a question that you already know, but to be able to accentuate the positives and the strengths and the skills that you have, knowing that you're going to bring value to any organization that you want to join. I look forward to your work on this process, and we'll get back together next time.